What is going on, you guys? Wonder Bro, and today we're going to talk about the fact that you do not have to talk back to your thoughts. You do not have to argue with your thoughts. And let me dive a little deeper into that, because you hear that, but you don't really, some people may not really grasp what I mean by that. What I mean by that is when you have a thought, and with all that chatter going on in our heads almost 24/7 that most people are identifying with and taking so seriously, and all this stuff, and since thoughts create emotion like anxiety, that's not a good thing. The mind is a powerful thing. It's awesome that we have a thinking mind. It's took many years of evolution to get a thinking mind. I've made this point before, but now it's controlling us. But here's the good news. You do not have to argue with your mind. The mind can be like a child, okay? And this applies whether you're sensitized or not, whether your nerves are tired and fragile and weak or not. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you have a lot of anxiety or, just a little bit of anxiety. It doesn't matter. This applies to everyone and can help everyone. It doesn't matter. So, your mind, and I've already got off track of what I was saying before I made that point. But your mind is going to be going 24/7. And as long as you're identified with that, you're going to suffer. Now, you do not have to argue with your mind. So if I'm sitting here and I get a thought that tells me I have to worry about this or about that, I'm going to get a reaction. If I start talking back to that and arguing with that, it's going to lead to more thoughts, and I'm going to continue to get an emotional reaction, since thought does create emotion, because our brain doesn't know the difference between thought and reality, so that's why it creates emotion. I'm going to get a lot of emotion, probably negative, because most of our thoughts do tend to be negative or, worrisome. So if I sit there and I argue and I talk back to this, I could end up doing that all night and all day until I eventually go to sleep, and that's what most people do. And that means I'm going to be experiencing more than likely uncomfortable emotions all night and all day. And if you're sensitized, this is going to be amplified even more. But whether you're sensitized or not, like I said earlier, it doesn't matter. This is helpful for everybody. So the thought is kind of like a child. It pulls you in, you get these thoughts that randomly pop up, and they beg for your attention. And if you notice the thought, accept that it came, don't get frustrated, there's that thought again. Accept that you had it, there's nothing you can do about it. Accept it, and then don't argue back with it. Don't talk back to it. So if you need to say something, and there may come a point when you practice this enough that you don't have to really say something to remind yourself, you can just do it in silence. But if you have to say something when a thought pops up, you can say to yourself, I'm not going to argue with you. Because the mind really is like a child. It wants your attention. It grabs your attention with these thoughts, and they tend to get a little bit sticky. And, I keep bringing this point up, but especially if you're sensitized, then, this is all amplified. But they tend to get a bit sticky. So it comes once, and you're like, okay, I accept that thought. This is what you should do. I accept that I had that thought. I'm not going to get frustrated. But I'm not going to argue with that. And then just divert your attention back to what's going on around you, back to the present moment. But my point is, they tend to get sticky. So you do that once, and they tend to come back maybe 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, maybe even 20 seconds later. It just depends person to person. Maybe even 20 seconds later, it's back. But as long as you dedicate to, and like I said, if you have to remind yourself every time by saying, I'm not going to argue with that, then do it. But if you dedicate to that, every single time these sticky thoughts pop up, your brain starts to see that they must not be dangerous, they must not be important, because you're not arguing back with it. Now, if you argue back with it, it gets momentum. Your brain gets the wrong message. It says, this must be important, this must be dangerous. He's arguing back with it. He or she is arguing back with it. So it keeps giving you that thought, because in your brain, you're training it the wrong way. You're training it to see these thoughts as important and dangerous to your life, because you're giving them so much momentum and power by arguing back with them like a child. Not that you're the child, but the brain is the thoughts are the child. You're arguing back with them, and your brain gets the wrong message. Now, if you dedicate, even if you have to do this 1,000,000 times a day, 1,000,000,000 times a day, maybe that's stretching it, but if you have to do this a lot at the beginning, which you probably will, especially if you are sensitized, that is fine. But if you dedicate to it, eventually your brain gets the right message, and these thoughts lose their power, and your nerves start to heal. And then when your nerves heal and these thoughts come, they don't bring as much emotion or feeling with them. You're kind of back to your old self, when your nerves heal. And even if you're not sensitized and you have bothersome, worrisome thoughts that act like they need to be answered, they act so important, they pull you in. They pull you in time and time again, and you feel obligated. You feel like you absolutely have to talk back to these thoughts. You feel like you absolutely have to give them your attention, like you have to talk back to them. The thoughts come and they pretend to be important. They say, you have to worry about me. You have to do this, you have to do that, or you're not going to be prepared for whatever it is, whatever your thought is, whatever your worry is. You're not going to be prepared and something bad's going to happen, and you need to know the answers, so you have to worry about me. This is very important. And that's what your thoughts are trying to say to you. But what you need to understand is that you are not your mind, you are not your thoughts. So when your thoughts come in, like the children that they are, always begging for your attention and creating an emotion in your body, as we've already established, because your brain sees those thoughts as real and threatening. When that happens, if you dedicate to just accepting the fact that you had the thought, like I said, don't get frustrated, oh man, there's that thought again, and get yourself all worked up. No, you would use acceptance, just like you accept the emotion it brings, just like you accept the anxiety. You would accept that the thought came. Don't get frustrated, you're working on it, you're retraining. So accept it, and then dedicate to not arguing with it. You don't have to argue with your mind. And that's the point of this video. That's probably going to be the title of this video. You do not have to argue with your mind. Although it seems, because your mind makes it out to be this way, it seems like it's so important and that you have to. That you have to, or you're going to be unprepared. Something bad might happen. You have to sort this thought out in order for it to leave you alone. You have to sort this thought out in order for it to move on. But that's actually quite the opposite. The more time you spend trying to get this thought to move on by arguing with it, or figuring it out, or worrying about it, or thinking about it, or trying to satisfy it, the more it tends to stick around, because now it's got momentum. Now your brain sees it as important. So of course it wants to keep bringing this thought back up, because you're giving it so much power, and your brain's trying to save you and help you. And since you're giving this thought so much power, it's assuming that you need this thought. You need to figure it out. So it's going to keep bringing it back. And that's why thoughts seem so important. That's why we feel the urge. And I know how strong of an urge it is to think about our thoughts and to figure out our worries. But it's not. And if you dedicate to just accepting that these thoughts came and then downright refusing to get involved, that is acceptance, because it's kind of like, when you get involved with your mind and you fight with your mind, that's fighting with it. And we're all about accepting our feelings and our thoughts. And to not fight with your thoughts is to not argue with them. So if you dedicate to accepting the thought, and then saying to yourself, if you have to do this at first, that's fine. Later on down the road, you can do it in silence. But if you have to say to yourself, I'm not going to argue with that, and then just accept it. And if it comes back, do it again, and again, and again, and again. And you start to realize that you are not your mind, and your brain starts to get the right message, and you step out of your mind and back into the real world. And this helps your nerves heal. And even if your nerves don't need healed, you still live a better quality of life if you dedicate to doing this. Is this going to work overnight? Are the thoughts going to leave you alone the first time you do this? Absolutely not. You've been spending I don't know how many years probably entertaining these thoughts, and they tend to be the same thoughts. This is just, a side note. Not saying you can't develop new worrisome thoughts, but they tend to be the same thoughts over and over again, and wonder why that is because you've gave them so much importance in the past by arguing with them. You think you're doing yourself a favor. You think you have to do this, but you don't. So when you dedicate to not arguing with them, and I know the urge is so strong to want to get involved with them so they'll leave you alone, but you're doing the opposite, believe me. When you accept the thought and refuse to argue with it, even if you have to tell yourself, I'm not going to argue with you, and then just divert your attention back to the present moment, back to the real world, and not so much the head, the mind, which pretends to be so important but isn't, then you start to live a better quality of life. Now you're probably wondering, what if it's a thought that really is important? Most thoughts tend to not be important. I'll just go ahead and say that. But let's say it's a practical thought, like, what am I, let's say you've got plans for the next day, you've got plans for tomorrow with somebody, So you have to think about it. You have to come up with a time that you want to meet this person, a place that you want to meet this person, so on and so forth. That's practical. If you want to use the mind for practical purposes, that's fine. That's why we have a thinking mind, because, the mind is a powerful tool, but it's not a tool anymore. It's controlling most people. Instead of being a tool that we use, like somebody would use a shovel, it's using us. And, so if it's a practical thought, then yes, and you're smart enough to know what a practical thought is. I don't think I have to give you any examples on what a practical thought is. But if it's a worry that's years down the road, if it's a worry that you already know what you've got to do, there's no more thinking that needs to be done. You know what you've got to do to improve this life situation that you're in, then you don't need to entertain the thought anymore. You already know what action you need to take. Take the action and stop arguing with the thoughts. And it's going to make you feel, or maybe it'll make you feel like you're unprepared. But the thing is, when you live in the present moment and not so much in your head, you're actually more prepared and ready to take on whatever challenges may arise in the real world, not your mind, but in the real world, you're actually more prepared and ready to take those challenges on when you're living in a place in the present moment. When you're living out of the mind and in the real world, you don't go into these things unprepared, although your mind will tell you with a thought that says if you don't worry, you'll be unprepared. That is not true. You will be prepared. You will know what to do. You're not going to lose your intelligence all of a sudden because you quit arguing with your mind and your thoughts and you quit worrying. You're going to know what action needs to be took. You don't become oblivious to the world when you do this. When you step out of your mind and into the real world, you still have your personality. You're still the person you are with your traits. You still know what action needs to be taken in your life. You still know that you need to set your alarm clock and be up at such and such time to go to work. You still know that you need to take care of your kids. You still know all of your responsibilities, and you still know what to do. You're just not thinking or worrying about it so much. So every time a thought pops up, and if you dedicate to this, this will really help heal your nerves, because thoughts are the true source of suffering, since thoughts do create emotion. I mean, sometimes a situation will create an emotion, and that'll create a thought. They go hand in hand. Let's not complicate things. But if you dedicate to just accepting your thoughts, not getting mad that they came, and then saying to yourself, I'm not going to argue with you, and diverting your attention back to the real world gently, do this gently. Don't do this trying to distract yourself or run away. Accept. If the thought brought an emotion, that's fine. Let it bring an emotion. Accept that emotion. And then say, I'm not going to argue with you. And this gently go back into what you were doing. And if you have to do this 100, 1,000 times, that's fine. Eventually, this will heal your nerves. And eventually, these thoughts will leave you alone. And they'll start coming less and less. And then as your nerves heal, if the thought does come back in the future, although it should be way less frequently, it won't create such an amplified emotion. Now, if you do this long enough and you start living in the present moment and you stop arguing with your head, you really start to live. That is truly living, because the past is just a thought. The future is just a thought. Everything happens right here and now, and that's how it'll always be. When you do this, you heal your nerves. You start to live a better quality life, and it's going to try to pull you in. It is a tricky, tricky thing. It's going to pretend to be so very important, but it is not. You will know what to do when action is required. You do not need to think. All right? Step out of your head. You are not your mind. I love each and every one of you. Accept your thoughts, accept your feelings, and stop arguing with your thoughts. Stop it. Stop getting involved with it all, and you will heal. You must dedicate to this. You must practice this. You must put this into action for it to work. Do not give up overnight. This is simpler than it seems. Although it may be difficult at first, it does get easier and easier. The concept is simple. Actually doing it may not be as simple, but you can still do it. And this is going to bring you peace. Eventually this will bring you peace. It may not seem like it's working at first, and that's normal, but it's going to bring you peace if you dedicate to it. I can't make you do it. I can open the door, but you got to step through it. All right, you guys, I hope you've had a great new year. I love each and every one of you. It's been a great year here on the channel. Almost 2,000 subs. Help me hit that goal, you guys. I love you. I'm so grateful for everything you do. I hope somebody out there takes something from this video. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can do so at WonderBroYo. If you want to like the Facebook page, you can do so at WonderBroYo as well. All right, you guys, don't party too hard tonight. And until next time, as always, stay awesome.